voices in the basement, and I couldn't wake up. The night it began, the house remembered me better than I remembered it. I arrived with boxes and a sleep that had been stolen in stages over months. The moving van left, and the porch light hummed like a throat clearing. Upstairs, my room was exactly where my past had been folded. A narrow bed, a lamp that always flickered, a dresser gummed with old fingerprints. The basement door in its crooked frame sat below, heavy as a notice. I told myself exhaustion explained the thin, deliberate sounds that first moved through the floorboards. Sleep, when it came, sat at the edge of my throat like a small animal I wouldn't feed. I woke to voices that were not quite voices, a low, easy conversation that threaded the floor. They spoke in the empty register of late-night radio, intermittent, intimate. But when I strained to hear, the words rearranged themselves into fragments that belonged to me. A childhood nickname, an old joke, the rhythm of my mother's voice. The house gave those echoes shape, and I lay awake, listening to how precise they were becoming. The next morning felt rehearsed. I moved through coffee and boxes like someone following directions I'd only half remembered. Wherever I went, the house answered, not with footsteps, but with tonal impressions. A chuckle tuned to my own, a sigh that pinched at the exact place in my chest where I kept guilt. I tried to ignore it and left a phone recording on the nightstand. When I played the file back, there was only a thin hiss, and beneath it, a hesitancy in the air I couldn't capture. The sense of being named softly by something that sounded like hardwood and breath. By afternoon, the voices picked at little facts like loose threads. The street I'd walked as a kid, the shop where I'd left a jacket, the exact name of a friend I hadn't spoken to in years. They never sounded accusatory, only familiar, as if the house were cataloging my inventory to make room for itself. I called the friend, he laughed, and said he hadn't been to town in a decade. Still, the house murmured on. I began to distrust silence, because even silence in that place seemed organized, like a drawer closed around something living. Nights were worse. I would wake as if pulled from a deep well and find the room wrong by degrees. The lamp lower, the photograph angled away, the blanket folded wrong. More than once, I opened the bedroom door, and the house seemed to hold its breath. The basement door would be closed but not shut, as if someone had pushed it just so and waited. Once, in the dark, a voice said my name in the soft cadence of someone remembering a melody. My mouth made a reply I never meant to say. I tried to be rational. Old houses settle, memories echo. Loneliness invents companions. So I kept a list in a notebook, time, sound, what was said, and watched patterns congeal. The voices favored ordinary sentences, harmless observations. They spoke of the weather, of cups left in odd places, of the exact way I scratched my chin when I lied. That accuracy was what made them dangerous. A coincidence would have been easier to dismiss than the way they described the private little habits I thought belonged only to me. Once I set a camera on the landing directed at the basement door. In the morning, the footage showed the door closed, the film grain steady, no movement. But when I watched frame by frame with the sound turned up, the flux of the light on the floor sped like someone breathing through a mouth at the edge of sleep. My camera recorded nothing that could be filed, held, or played back to another person who would then agree. It recorded only what the house allowed me to see. Surfaces obedient, interior logic private. On a shelf under the lamp, I found the pocket watch I hadn't remembered packing, tarnished and cold as if it had been waiting for me. Its hands were frozen at midnight. The voice, that evening, read the time aloud with the casual inflection of someone relaying the weather. The watch did not move when I wound it, but in the hour before dawn, I woke repeatedly to the exact, tiny click of something small shifting. Once, the watch said, the house kept time by people, collecting their slow hours like coins. The pattern tightened until there were no safe moments. I would stand in the kitchen and know the basement was talking as if it were 3 rooms away and also inside my skull. The voices adopted household cadences, mending, folding, the rhythm of kettles, so domestic I felt foolish to be afraid. But fear is not always loud. Often it is patient. It waits in the gap between sentences, in the way a conversation stops so someone can answer with what you ought to have said all along. One night I swore I would go down. I brought a lamp, a bat of wood left over from the move, and a resolve that felt brittle. The staircase smelled of cold earth and old paint. Each step made a stubborn, private noise that the house did not answer. Halfway down, a single sentence threaded through the darkness. "I remember you here," it said, and the voice arranged itself into the cadence of someone smiling. I stopped and found the light in my hand trembled as if it too were listening. At the bottom, the concrete was more intact than the memory of it, clean in a way that felt staged. There were no bodies, no ritual marks, no proof of the conversations that had been moving through the house. There was only a small metal folding chair placed facing the wall, and the faint echo of a sentence that was not mine, but knew the timbre of my silence. On the wall, a photograph hung at a crooked angle, the face in it blurred when I tried to focus, as if refusing to resolve into a single identity. I started hearing my own rhythm echoed back to me, the exact tempo of my breath, my habitual cough, the way I clicked my tongue when thinking. That mimicry was subtle and therefore worse, like a friend learning your gestures too perfectly. When I spoke aloud the words the house had taught me, the room answered with a different completion, as if it had been rehearsing responses. The mirror above the sink refused to be a simple reflector. Sometimes the reflection lagged an instant behind, a delayed apology that made my skin feel foreign. I rigged a rigmarole of devices, voice recorders, lights on timers, a circle of objects arranged by habit. The house answered them all with a peculiar courtesy, as if an attentive guest rearranged to accommodate every little contrivance. Sometimes the objects shifted an inch when I left them alone. Sometimes the timers chimed to moments of silence. Once, a recorder caught a lullaby I had not sung in years, hummed in a register that was child-size and impossible at once. I played it back until the recording wore thin and meant nothing. The house learned the shape of my pauses. It learned to answer questions with the soft click that happens when someone chooses to be kind instead of honest. I began to test it with impossible lies, statements about places I'd never been, dates that didn't exist, and the house would correct me With such ease it felt like I'd stumbled into a conversation it had already begun preparing. The correction was never hostile. It was domestic, patient, like someone clearing the table and arranging silverware after you've been foolish enough to spill wine. On the last night, I let the lamp go out to see what would happen. The darkness had a density to it I had never felt before, like a page waiting for ink. The house spoke as a chorus then, not with malice, but with intent. It ran through memory slips, misremembered conversations, entire afternoons I could not account for. It was not only remembering, it was filling in. I tried to rise, to leave, but my limbs obeyed the slow laws of a body that had been taught to wait. Somewhere below, something put itself gently into the rhythm I attempted to break. I pressed my palms to my eyes and told myself to wake. The words felt inadequate, a trick for mornings that failed here. The last thing I can describe with any certainty is the sensation of the house listening, like a person who has been given a long pause in which to consider what to say next. Its silence was not emptiness, but deliberation, thick and domestic. I don't know whether I finally woke or simply changed the kind of consciousness I was carrying. I know only that the house, patient and precise, continued to answer with things it had learned about me.